Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show that shortcuts your way to being well-informed, one fascinating topic at a time.
Glad to be diving in.
Today, we're looking at something fundamental. We're not just looking at language, we're plunging into the very bedrock of how we communicate, maybe even how we think, how we construct our shared reality.
It's huge when you stop to think about it.
Have you ever stopped to truly reflect about how we make sense of the words we hear and speak every single day?
We mostly just do it without thinking.
Exactly. Does a word just, mean something on its own, like it's a label stuck onto an object?
Or is it something more complex?
Or is its meaning woven into something far more intricate, something deeper, something we rarely ever consider in our daily conversations? Imagine for a moment trying to understand a brand new language from scratch, no prior knowledge, no grammar books. Where would you even begin? How do you break down that wall of sound into meaning?
It's a profound thought, isn't it? We navigate our world through language, often as unconsciously as we breathe. Yet beneath the surface of every casual utterance, every sentence, every single word, lies an incredibly intricate architecture that makes all communication possible.
And the intellectual architect who really reshaped our understanding of this invisible architecture, not just for language, but for thought itself and, for the very fabric of human culture.
It's Ferdinand de Saussure.
Ferdinand de Saussure, a name maybe not everyone knows instantly.
Perhaps not, but his ideas are absolutely foundational, pervasive. You find them everywhere in the human sciences: anthropology, literary theory, psychology, philosophy.
He really was an intellectual giant, a foundational thinker. And what's particularly fascinating, maybe even a bit surprising, about these core revolutionary concepts is their origin story.
Ah, yes, the course.
Right. We're not talking about some meticulously crafted book that Saussure himself published during his lifetime. Not at all.
No, these insights, these really deep philosophical arguments about meaning, they actually come to us from notes taken by his students during his lectures.
Can you imagine the energy in those rooms? And apparently, Saussure had this habit. He destroyed his own rough notes after giving a lecture.
He did. So what we have today is this compilation, this painstaking reconstruction done by his dedicated students, Charles Bally, Albert Sechehay, Albert Riedlinger.
Right.
And assembled only after his passing. This incredible work, the course in General Linguistics, it's really a testament to the impact of his oral teaching.
It really is. It somehow captures the temper of its times, even though it's reconstructed. It gives us this rare, almost intimate glimpse into a brilliant mind grappling, in real time with the very essence of communication, of thought itself.
It truly is a remarkable intellectual legacy. And the challenge for those students, piecing together such a complex, coherent system from their individual notes, it was immense.
I can only imagine.
As they put it, their task was to reconstruct a synthesis, using the third course, the last lectures, as a starting point, and then using all other materials at our disposal.
So not just a transcription?
Not at all. Their goal was an objective recreation. They had to carefully weed out the variations, the irregularities you always get with spontaneous oral delivery to present a coherent whole system. Their dedication alone just speaks volumes about how important, how forceful, how coherent Saussure's ideas must have seemed, even just hearing them in lectures.
It's amazing. His thinking was so robust that students could pull out this whole system from what were essentially classroom discussions.
A testament to its power, definitely.
So our mission today, as you might have guessed, is a deep dive into these foundational concepts from Saussure.
Let's do it.
Our goal is to unpack his most revolutionary ideas, explore their profound philosophical underpinnings, and really understand how they provide a shortcut to being well-informed about the invisible structures that shape our world, often without us even realizing it. Get ready, because we're going to discover how his insights offer those genuine aha moments, the kind that connect to everything from how we choose our words to how societies are structured, maybe even how our very thoughts take shape.
It connects to so much.
Let's unpack this. #I, background in intellectual earthquakes. Okay, so before Saussure really entered the picture, how is language actually studied? It seems like the intellectual landscape was, a bit fragmented for language itself.
That's a good way to put it. You had grammar, but often that was more about prescriptive rules, wasn't it?
Right, telling you how you should speak, how to be correct.
Exactly. Not really a scientific observation of how people actually use language in their daily lives. It felt detached from living language, focused more on, normative correctness than linguistic structure.
So more like etiquette than science in a way.
In some respects, yes. Then you had philology, Now, philology was different. It focused primarily on interpreting written texts. Its roots go way back, ancient Alexandria even, but it really picked up steam in the late 18th century.
And it was historical.
Oh, definitely historical. Philologists diligently researched literary history, customs, institutions through texts. But Saussure argued it largely neglected living speech. It became, as he put it, too slavishly tied to the written word. Now, it absolutely broke ground for historical linguistics by analyzing texts meticulously, no doubt about that. But it wasn't studying language as an independent system. It was studying language more as an artifact within a broader cultural or literary context.
Okay. And then there was the third area, comparative philology.
Right, comparative philology. This emerged around 1816. Figures like Franz Bopp were pioneers. This was groundbreaking for its time. It involved comparing different languages, especially Indo-European ones, to find common origins, trace their evolution.
This sounds closer to modern linguistics.
It was a huge step forward. Bopp recognized that this comparison could form an independent science. He showed how looking at Sanskrit alongside Latin and Greek, for example, could illuminate relationships you wouldn't otherwise see.
Like finding patterns.
Exactly. Simply comparing Latin genus and Greek genus doesn't reveal much, but add Sanskrit ganas, and suddenly a pattern emerges. It suggests ganas might be a more primitive state, and you can even trace predictable sound changes, like skies falling between vowels in Greek or becoming R in Latin.
That's clever.
It was revolutionary. But here's the crucial point Saussure made. While comparative philology opened up this incredibly fruitful field, it still didn't quite do what he thought was essential.
Which was?
It failed, he argued, to seek out the nature of its object of study. It didn't fundamentally ask, what is language?
So it was comparing things without defining the thing itself.
Precisely. Without that elementary foundational step defining what language is in and for itself, no science can truly develop a rigorous method, a clear domain. These comparatists were often so focused on comparing, they sometimes treated language development like watching plants grow, assuming languages pass through identical predetermined stages.
So Saussure's big move was?
His radical departure was to declare, with total clarity, that the true and unique object of linguistics is language studied in and for itself.
Wow, that's a statement.
It really was. Not just a methodological tweak, but a fundamental reorientation. He wanted to define language's inner organism, its intrinsic structure, separate from all the external factors, history, geography, individual psychology.
To make linguistics its own rigorous science.
Exactly. To establish its domain. He asked, and then answered, that profound question. What is the phenomenon we are even studying here, before studying what it does or what it was?
It's incredible to think about that declaration establishing an independent science. It's like saying, let's figure out what this thing is, this system, before we worry about where it came from or how it changes.
That's the essence of it.
And the way these ideas came to us, the course itself, it's a story almost as fascinating as the ideas inside.
The lost original, in a sense.
Right. We know the lectures were oral, spontaneous, and he destroyed his rough notes. So the book, the course, really is unique. After his death, his students Bali, Seshahe, Riedlinger, they were determined to preserve his teaching.
But when they looked for his manuscripts, they found nothing, or almost nothing, that resembled his students' notebooks.
So they had to rely
on the notes collected by students during the 3 series of lectures he gave between 1906 and 1911, it was an immense undertaking for them, an act of intellectual archaeology, really, and creative synthesis.
They weren't just transcribing.
Definitely not. Their goal was to attempt a reconstruction, a synthesis, using the third course as an anchor, then weaving in all available material, including some older notes of Saussure's they did find. The challenge, they said, was to recreate F. Saussure's thought in a wholly objective way.
Which meant filtering out the noise of spoken delivery.
Exactly. Weeding out the variations and irregularities characteristic of oral delivery to present a coherent whole system, a unified vision. That dedication, that almost reverent effort is why we have this masterpiece today. It lets us engage with his powerful ideas, even if not his exact spoken words.
They ensured his insights weren't lost.
They did.
And the impact of this reconstructed work, well, it was absolutely epical, wasn't it? These ideas didn't just stay within linguistics.
Not at all. They became the methodological blueprint for structuralism, a dominant intellectual movement across the humanities and social sciences.
Right, structuralism. So how did that work?
Well, think about someone like the anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss. He took Saussure's focus on language as a system of differences and applied it to analyze completely different things.
Like myths and kinship.
Exactly. Levi-Strauss used these principles to decode complex kinship systems, cultural rituals, myths, showing how they too operate like languages, with underlying structures of meaning. It was like Saussure provided a master key to unlock how meaning is made in culture, broadly speaking.
Wow. And it didn't stop there.
No, his work also sparked the birth of semiology. Saussure himself envisioned that this broader science of signs, a kind of meta-discipline, with linguistics being just one crucial part.
A science of all signs.
Yes. Semiology would investigate all sorts of cultural phenomena we might not think of as language, social rights, customs, fashion, literature, advertising. He argued they could all be understood as intricate sign systems.
And people ran with that idea.
Oh, absolutely. Think of later thinkers like Roland Barthes. He famously applied Saussurean principles to analyze everything from the semiotics of food to the cultural meanings in fashion magazines, wrestling matches, even cars.
It opened up whole new ways of looking at culture.
It really did.
And here's where it gets really interesting, showing the sheer gravity of his work. Even thinkers who came later and maybe critiqued Saussure.
They still had to engage with him.
Exactly. They found his framework indispensable, even if they were challenging or extending it.
Like Jacques Derrida, for instance. He took up Saussure's emphasis on speech over writing a powerful, if sometimes controversial, idea, and used it as a crucial starting point for his own deconstructionist theories.
So even in disagreement, Saussure was the reference point.
He was. And Michel Foucault, with his work on discourse and power structures, he also operated within an intellectual landscape profoundly shaped by Saussurean thought, even as he pushed its boundaries. Saussure's ideas created this ripple effect, forming an intellectual bedrock that shaped critical theory and postmodern thought for decades.
Enduring relevance, even when people argue against him?
That's often the mark of a truly foundational thinker.
Okay, let's get into the core concepts themselves. The architecture of meaning. Where do we start? The linguistic sign.
Absolutely, that's the foundation. Before Saussure, there was this, well, intuitive view, what he critically called the naming process.
The idea that words are just labels for things.
Pretty much. That language is just a list of words, and each word points directly to a pre-existing thing out there in the world. Like there's a tree, and the word tree is just its label.
Seems straightforward enough.
But Saussure completely challenged it. He said that view assumes that ready-made ideas exist before words, and he disputed that profoundly.
So ideas don't just exist waiting for names.
That's his crucial pivot. Instead, he defines the linguistic sign not as a link between a name and a thing, but as a two-sided psychological entity.
Two-sided?
Yes, uniting two interconnected elements, both mental constructs. On one side, the concept, the signified, the mental idea, the abstraction.
Okay.
On the other side, the sound image, the signifier. And this isn't the physical sound itself, but our psychological imprint, our mental impression of that sound pattern.
Ah, so both are in the mind.
Both are mental. So the concept of tree, the signified, is intimately linked in our minds to the sound image tree, the signifier. He stressed this union is inseparably one in our minds.
You can't have one without the other.
Exactly. And crucially, there's no signified as such, nothing to which a signifier simply corresponds. The idea doesn't exist independently, floating around waiting for a name. It only takes definite form through its bond with the sound image.
Wow. So language literally shapes thought.
In a very real way, yes. It structures it.
That's a huge shift. And it leads directly to his most famous principle, doesn't it? The arbitrary nature of the sign. Principle I.
That's the one. He states quite definitively that the bond between the signifier and the signified is arbitrary.
Meaning there's no real reason for the connection?
No inherent reason, no natural, logical, or even intuitive link. Why does the sound image "sœur" in French mean sister? There's no inherent sisterness in that sound.
And the proof is just looking at different languages.
Exactly. The concept ox is biatcher in French, ok's ends, German, and in English. None of those sound images is intrinsically more ox-like than the others. There's nothing about the sound that is the ox. It's purely conventional.
And the implications of that are huge.
Numberless, as Saussure said. It means language isn't made of symbols in the way we usually think of them. A symbol, like scales for justice, usually has some natural or metaphorical link.
But words don't.
Linguistic signs don't. Because they're arbitrary, there's no rational basis for arguing about them, for preferring one sign over another within a community. Tree isn't inherently better than arbor or balm.
And that's why language is so resistant to change by individuals.
Precisely. Why should anyone accept a new, equally arbitrary sign proposed by one person over the established, collectively accepted arbitrary sign. There's no logical foothold for such a change. Meaning isn't found in things, it's forged and agreed upon implicitly by a community.
What about things like woof or bang? Onomatopoeia.
He addresses those, he calls them secondary exceptions, and even their symbolic origin is in part open to dispute. They often change over time, get conventionalized, and aren't really integrated into the core arbitrary system in the same way. This principle of arbitrariness, he declared, dominates all the linguistics of language. Its consequences are profound.
Okay, so the sign is arbitrary. What's principle 2?
Principle 2 is the linear nature of the signifier.
Linear meaning.
Because the signifier, that sound image, is auditory. It unfolds solely in time. It represents a span, and that span is measurable in just one dimension. It's a line.
Unlike visual signs.
Right. Think of a complex diagram or maybe nautical signals. They can group multiple elements together and convey meaning simultaneously. But auditory elements, sounds, have to come one after another. They form an inescapable succession, a chain.
You can't say two words at once.
You simply can't say two distinct words or sounds at exactly the same time and have them understood as separate units. They must follow sequentially.
And the implications of that.
Also profound. Incalculable consequences, Saussure noted, for the whole mechanism of language. It means two linguistic elements cannot be pronounced simultaneously. Even if you think an accent on a syllable is doing two things at once, adding emphasis and being a sound, Saussure says that's an illusion. The syllable and the accent actually form a single phonational act, but they create different oppositions to what precedes and what follows. This seemingly simple linearity underpins how we process sound sequentially, forming the basis of spoken language, structuring how meaning builds up over time. It dictates the order of our thoughts as they become speech.
Okay, so we have this arbitrary sign unfolding linearly, but then comes this paradox he talks about. Immutability and mutability.
Yes, the great paradox of language. On one hand, the linguistic sign is incredibly fixed, stable. That's its immutability.
Fixed how?
Despite being arbitrary, the sign is fixed, not free, with respect to the linguistic community that uses it. No single individual, no matter how smart or persuasive, can just decide to change a word.
Right.
And even more striking, the entire community, the collective, cannot control so much as a single word. Language is handed down. It's a heritage of the preceding period, accepted and used, mostly without question.
Why is it so fixed, though, if it's arbitrary? Seems like it should be easy to change.
But Saussure identifies several powerful reasons. First, the arbitrary nature itself works against change. If there's no logic to sister being sister, what's the logic for changing it? There's no rational basis for debate. Second, the sheer multiplicity of signs. There are just too many words in any language for anyone to consciously alter. Imagine a committee trying to redesign English.
Impossible.
Third, the overcomplexity of the system. Language is this incredibly intricate mechanism. Specialists might analyze it, but everyday users just use it. They don't grasp the whole system consciously.
And fourth,
collective inertia. Language is deeply embedded in society, and society itself tends to be inert, resistant to rapid change in its fundamental structures. So Saussure concludes, language is least amenable to initiative. It just is.
Okay, that makes sense. It feels very stable. But here's the kicker, the paradox. It does change.
Exactly, that's its mutability. Despite all its conservative forces, Saussure states clearly that language evolution is inevitable. After a certain period of time, some obvious shifts can always be recorded.
It's alive, not fossilized.
Precisely. It's always in slow, often unconscious motion, evolving in ways no single person dictates.
And how does this change happen then? What shifts?
These shifts always result in a shift in the relationship between the signified and the signifier. Think of his example. Latinacere meant to kill. Over centuries, it evolved into French noyer, which means to drown.
So the meaning changed drastically.
The bond between the idea and the sign was loosened, and the relationship shifted. Language, he says, is powerless to defend itself against the forces which from one moment to the next are shifting the relationship. It's this dynamic tension. Language is a product of both massive social force and time, constantly remaking itself despite resisting conscious intervention.
A continuous reinterpretation.
A living system in perpetual slow motion.
This inherent paradox seems to lead right into another crucial distinction he makes. Langue and parole.
Absolutely fundamental. Often confused, but critical to his whole system.
So, langue first, pronounced.
Langue. Almost like song, but with a soft nasal N.
Okay, langue, what is it?
It's the abstract, social, systematic side of language. Think of it like the entire code, the complete grammar book, the dictionary, the underlying rules, all residing in the collective mind of a speech community.
The system.
Yes, a social product deposited in the brain of each individual, a collection of necessary conventions adopted by a social body. It's homogeneous, a system of signs, and importantly, using it never requires premeditation from the individual. It exists outside the individual who can never create nor modify it by himself.
Like his symphony analogy.
Exactly. Langue is the abstract musical score itself. It exists independently of any specific performance. You perform from the score. You don't perform the score itself.
Okay, so langue is the system. Then parole. Pronounced parole.
Correct. Parole is the contrast. It's the concrete, individual act of using the language. Actual speaking, writing, listening, understanding in a specific moment.
The performance of the symphony.
Exactly. It's willful and intellectual. It covers the specific combinations by which the speaker uses the language code for expressing his own thought, and also the psychophysical mechanism, the mental and physical act of turning thoughts into words.
And unlike langue, it's messy.
Very. It's heterogeneous. Every utterance is unique, influenced by psychology, context, intent, mood, countless variables. You can't really study parole as a coherent whole systemically because it's too varied, too individual, too fleeting.
So distinct concepts, but they're obviously connected.
Deeply interdependent. Langue is necessary if speaking is to be intelligible, right?
Yeah.
You need the shared code, the rules, otherwise it's just noise.
Makes sense.
But paradoxically, parole is equally necessary for the establishment of language. How do we learn langue in the first place?
By hearing people speak, by experiencing parole.
Exactly. Through countless experiences of parole, the system, the langue, gets gradually deposited in our minds. So they create this profound reciprocal delimitation.
A dynamic dialectic. One defines and enables the other.
Precisely. Like a living symphony score that only exists because we keep performing it, while the score itself shapes every note we play. A constant dynamic tension.
That's a powerful image.
It is. And this distinction then sets the stage for understanding another critical aspect: how language exists now versus how it changes over time.
Synchronic versus diachronic.
Exactly. Saussure established what he called a radical antinomy, an absolute opposition between these two viewpoints. He said it's absolute and allows no compromise. You have to study them separately.
You can't mix them.
You can't study both simultaneously without getting completely confused. They need different methods, different perspectives.
Okay, so synchronic first. That's the static view.
Right. Synchronic linguistics studies language in a state, like taking a snapshot at one moment in time. You look at the language at a particular point, focusing on the logical and psychological relations that bind together coexisting terms and form a system in the collective mind of speakers.
Like his analogies, the plant stem cross-section, or the chessboard.
Yes, those are perfect. Taking a transverse cut of the stem shows its structure now. Looking at the chessboard shows the state of the set of chessmen, where each piece's value comes from its current position right now, regardless of how it got there.
Can you give a language example?
Sure. Think about French, a mur décrépit, a crumbling wall, and un homme décrépit, the decrepit man. Synchronically, we look at how speakers today relate these phrases, how they perceive a connection between forms, even if historically decrepit in relation to walls came from a different root, crepitus, than decrepit to a people. Decrepitus. The current perceived relationship is the synchronic fact.
Okay. And synchronic laws are?
General but not imperative, he said. They reflect an existing arrangement, like trees in an orchard arranged in the shape of a quincunx. They report a state of affairs which is precarious precisely because it is not imperative. It exists now, but it's not eternally fixed.
Got it. So then diachronic linguistics is the opposite, the evolutionary view.
Exactly. Diachronic studies language in evolution, looking specifically at changes over time. It's like examining the longitudinal fibers of that plant stem, tracing its growth.
So it looks at successive terms.
Right. Relations that bind together successive terms, not perceived by the collective mind, but substituted for each other without forming a system at any single point. Using the decrepit example again, diachronic linguistics would trace the Latin root crispus evolving into French crepi for walls, and then separately trace the borrowing of decrepitus for people into French later on. These historical sound changes and borrowings are diachronic facts.
And these facts are different in nature.
Yes, he saw diachronic facts as accidental and particular, often outside the system, as a direct systemic force. They force themselves upon language, but aren't general in their systemic impact at any one moment. A sound change, like the stews becoming R in Latin historically, affects individual elements as they pass through time, but doesn't instantly reorganize the whole system synchronically.
So it's crucial to keep these separate, what language is now versus how it got here.
Absolutely crucial for clarity and rigor.
Okay, now this next concept, linguistic value and difference. This feels like we're getting to the really deep philosophical core.
I think so too. It's profound. Saussure argues, quite strikingly, that without language, thought is a vague, uncharted nebula.
Wow, so thought isn't clear before language.
Neither ideas nor sounds exist in perfectly pre-delimited, distinct forms before language gives them shape. Language, in this view, is what organizes this nebulous thought and formless sound. It's the domain of articulations where an idea is fixed in a sound and a sound becomes the sign of an idea.
So language doesn't just describe reality, it structures it actively.
That's the implication. And this leads to another crucial point. Language is fundamentally a form and not a substance.
Form, not substance. What does that mean exactly?
Think of his famous analogy, the sheet of paper. Thought is the front and the sound the back. One cannot cut the front without cutting the back at the same time.
Right. Signifier and signified are inseparable.
Exactly. But it also means their combination produces a form, not a substance. The physical sounds, the raw ideas, those aren't the substance of language. Rather, it's the structure, the relationships, the systematic organization they create when they combine that constitutes the form of language.
It's the invisible web of connections, not the individual threads.
Beautifully put, yes.
And this is where the big aha moment comes in. The idea that in language there are only differences without positive terms.
This is truly profound. It means the value of each term results solely from the simultaneous presence of the others.
So words don't have meaning on their own.
Not in an isolated positive sense. There are no pre-existing inherent ideas or sounds in language, only conceptual and phonic differences that have issued from the system. It's not about what a word is intrinsically, but what it isn't compared to all the other words. Meaning emerges from opposition, from contrast.
Can you give that sheep mutton example again? That really clarifies it.
Sure. French mouton has the same basic signification as English sheep. It refers to the animal, but it doesn't have the same value.
Why not?
Because English has two terms. Sheep, the living animal, and mutton, the meat from the animal. This creates a specific system of distinctions. In French, mouton covers both the animal and its meat. The presence of mutton in English changes the value of sheep.
Even though the basic meaning animal is the same?
Right. It perfectly shows that the value of a term may be modified without either its meaning or its sound being affected, solely because a neighboring term has been modified. Meaning is inherently relational, defined by what surrounds it, by the differences.
And the zero sign example.
Another great illustration. In Czech, the absence of an inflectional ending can mark the genitive plural case for some nouns. This zero sign gets its meaning purely from its opposition to other forms that do have endings. The difference itself creates the value, not some positive quality.
Difference is everything.
In the system, yes.
Okay, so to complete this architecture, Saussure identified two fundamental types of relations that organize everything, like two X's.
Exactly. Synagmatic and associative relations.
Syntagmatic first. These are in presentia.
Yes, meaning they exist in the presence of other elements in actual discourse. They are formed inside discourse along that linear sound chain. Think about word order in a sentence one after the other.
The sequence matters.
Vitally. Their order is fixed within an utterance, and they combine to form a larger structure, like the difference between je dois, I must, and dois je, must I, in French meaning shifts just because of the sequence.
Or compound words.
Good example. French to faire, no doit d'neuf. The parts combine in a specific linear sequence, and the meaning comes from that ordered combination. English gooseberry wine is totally different from wine gooseberry. Only the syntagmatic relation, the order, changes the meaning.
Okay, that's the linear axis. What about the other one, associative relations?
These are associative or sometimes called paradigmatic relations. They are, in absentia, they occur outside discourse.
Meaning in our heads?
Exactly. In the inner storehouse of a speaker's brain, their memory. Words get associated based on common elements, a shared root, teach, teacher, a common suffix, teaching, arming, similarity of meaning, teaching, education, or even just similar sound images. Sen, fusno.
And these aren't ordered?
No, they occur neither in fixed numbers nor in a definite order. It's a mental network, A constellation of related items, not a fixed sequence like a sentence. Think of Latin inflectional paradigms. Dominus, domini, domino. They're grouped in the mind around a common stem, forming an associative set.
So syntagmatic is the chain, associative is the mental storehouse.
A good way to think of it.
And they work together.
Critically, they aren't separate phenomena operating independently. They're in simultaneous functioning. They are interdependent and mutually condition each other.
How so?
When you speak, when you construct a sentence, or even coin a new word, you're engaging both axes. You select terms from your mental associative paradigms, that huge internal dictionary, and then you arrange them along the syntagmatic chain of actual speech, creating the linear sequence.
Can you give an example of that interplay?
Sure. Forming marchons, let's walk, in French. You select that specific imperative plural form from a latent associative set of verb forms, marcher, marcher, etc., to achieve the desired differentiation collective action. You pick from the paradigm and place it in a syntagm. It's a constant dynamic interplay between selection, associative, and arrangement, syntagmatic, that makes language work.
Okay, so Saussure built this intricate model of language's internal structure, but he was also very keen on defining linguistics as its own science, right? Setting boundaries with other fields.
Absolutely. A crucial part of establishing a science is defining its object and its limits. He argued for a clear fundamental division between internal linguistics, studying that inner organism, the system, the sign, value, etc., and what he termed external linguistics.
External linguistics being?
Everything outside the language system itself that might influence it. Things like political history, how conquest or colonization spreads a language, or how government policy affects linguistic unity, like France versus Switzerland.
Okay.
What else? Also the relations between language and institutions like the church or schools, the development of literature, the geographical spread leading to dialects, all sorts of external factors.
Did he think those were unimportant?
Not at all. He explicitly acknowledged this external side contained important things, and that linguistics touches on domains that do not belong to it. But for clarity, for rigor, especially for teaching, he insisted on studying the internal organism first. He believed knowledge of external circumstances is never indispensable for studying the internal system itself.
So define the core first, then look at connections later.
That seems to be the strategy, carving out a precise domain for the science.
And this helped separate linguistics from, say, anthropology, sociology, psychology.
Yes. While language obviously provides valuable data for all those fields, Saussure felt linguistics proper had to maintain its distinct object. Anthropology studies humans as a species. Sociology studies social facts. Psychology studies the individual mind's sign mechanism.
But language, for Saussure, was a specific type of social fact needing its own approach.
Exactly. A unique social fact requiring focus on its unique semiological problem. He even noted that the actual phonic character of the sign, the physical properties of the sounds, is ultimately unrelated to what constitutes language as a system of values and differences. The sounds are the medium, but not the system itself.
So the separation wasn't about total isolation?
No, it seems more about establishing clarity of purpose and methodological autonomy. And it leads directly to his grander vision. Linguistics as just one part of a much broader science. Semiology.
Oh.
He saw linguistics as a special system within the mass of semiological data. Semiology, or semiotics as we often call it now, would be a science that studies the life of signs within society.
All signs, not just words.
All signs, rites, customs, etc. as signs. Think about fashion again. It's a system of signs conveying meaning, status, identity through choices of clothes, colors, styles, traffic lights, symbolic gestures. All these could be studied by semiology.
That's fascinating. He saw language almost as the model system.
Very much so. He believed that language, better than anything else, offers a basis for understanding the semiological problem. Its specific features, especially the arbitrary sign and its systematic nature, provide the clearest way into understanding other sign systems.
So language is the key.
It's the key to unlocking the general principles of meaning-making across all human activity. This expansive vision opened up huge new avenues for inquiry that are still being explored today. It underscored the fundamental importance of language.
Now, Saussure's ideas were revolutionary, but like any big shift, they faced critiques, reinterpretations, sometimes misinterpretations, right? Leading to this idea of a Saussurean myth.
Yes, that happens with influential thinkers. A key example is that famous final sentence of the course. The true and unique object of linguistics is language studied in and for itself.
Which sounds pretty absolute.
It does, and it was often taken very rigidly, as if he wanted linguistics to be completely walled off from all other human sciences, creating this isolated, insular discipline.
But that wasn't quite his intention.
Well, a closer look at the source material suggests Saussure himself was hardly adamant about the separation. He clearly acknowledged an external side with important things, all those social and historical factors. He didn't dismiss them.
So why the strong statement?
It seems his emphasis on the internal organism first was largely pedagogical, a strategic move to clearly establish the specific object of linguistics before exploring its connections. Define the core rigorously, then build bridges. It wasn't about building an impenetrable wall.
More about laying a solid foundation.
Exactly. Providing a powerful lens, not total isolation.
Okay. Another common critique, this idea that focusing on form, not substance, and differences without positive terms leads to a kind of sterile formalism, detached from real life.
It's a critique you hear, that it makes language seem like this abstract, bloodless system of differences floating somewhere above reality.
Yeah, that sounds very abstract.
But I think that misses the dynamic aspect. While language is a system of differences, it's never static or dead. Saussure's framework actually shows how, in each language state, the mind actively infiltrated a given substance and breathed life into it.
Meaning?
Meaning is constantly being made from the contingent results of historical change and ongoing use. The distinctions are mental, yes, but they operate on and organize the substance of sound and thought, actively shaping perception. It's a continuous process of structuring and restructuring. Far from sterile, it's the very mechanism of making meaning relevant.
Okay. What about the critique regarding historical agency? Does Saussure's focus on synchrony make language seem static, like individuals have no impact?
That's a frequent charge, that it neglects agency, makes speakers seem like passive puppets of the langue.
Right. How does change happen if the system is primary?
Well, the text argues he easily engages and solves this. The langue-parole dialectic and the signified relationship actually give an unsuspected power to Saussure's notion of both the subject in history and history in the subject.
How so?
Because the constant reciprocal delimitation between the system and individual speech acts, parole, means language is always in flux. Change actually originates in parole in individual or collective ways of speaking. If these innovations catch on, get adopted widely, they eventually filter into and reshape the langue.
So change comes from the bottom up, through usage.
Exactly. Individual choices and actions, collectively taken over time, absolutely drive historical linguistic change. It gives agency back to speakers, albeit often collective and unconscious agency. It's not a rigid top-down system.
That's a crucial clarification. And despite critiques, his ideas had this massive ripple effect, didn't they? Influencing later thinkers, whole movements.
Undeniably. His binary oppositions, synchronodiachrony, syndic paradigm, became core analytical tools far beyond linguistics. Think of Jacobson and Halley on metaphor and metonymy, drawing directly on these axes. Or Gerard Genet distinguishing receipt, narrative discourse, from histoire, the story, in narrative theory, direct descendants of Saussure's structures.
Providing frameworks for meaning everywhere.
Yes, and what's fascinating is how his concepts resonated with other fields, like psychoanalysis.
Psychoanalysis, how?
His ideas about the temporality of the sign, its relational nature, they found parallels with Freudian concepts, particularly deferred action, not Träglichkeit. The idea that later events or interpretations can give new meaning to earlier ones, changing how we understand both past and present.
So meaning isn't fixed, it's constantly reinterpreted.
Exactly. It links Saussure's linguistic insights to the lived experience of signification, even to a new kind of historicism. Meaning is fluid, reconstituted through time, individually and collectively, a bridge between language and the psyche.
And the influence spread even further. Literature, social theory.
Absolutely. T.S. Eliot's famous idea that a new work of art simultaneously modifies all the works of art which preceded it, that directly mirrors Saussure's systemic view of value. Adding a new element reshapes the whole system, redefines the value of everything else. And even someone like Frantz Fanon, a hugely influential thinker on post-colonialism, who studies with Lacan, who was himself deeply influenced by Saussure.
Right.
Fanon used the idea of competing sign systems to analyze the complex reality of the post-colonial subject, how different cultural sign systems clash and interact. This shows the profound societal and political implications. Saussurean thought helps illuminate dynamics of power, identity, cultural struggle.
So far beyond just words.
Far beyond.
Okay, let's ground this a bit more. Look at some concrete applications, illustrations of Saussure's ideas in action. Starting with the big one, language versus writing.
A crucial distinction for him, and one that still catches people by surprise. For Saussure, speech is absolutely primary.
And writing.
He emphatically states that writing obscures language. It is not a guise for language, but a disguise.
A disguise, that's strong.
It is. He saw writing as secondary to speech, an artificial conventional system that often lags behind pronunciation. Therefore, it doesn't accurately or consistently represent the actual sounds of living language.
Which seems counterintuitive, given how much we rely on writing.
It does. But think about it. Writing is historical, conventional. Consider French spellings like mais, but, and fait, fact, both pronounced ending in an A, the final S and T are silent relics.
Or oiseau, bird donor.
Perfect example, pronounced was do. As Saussure notes, not one spoken sound is indicated by its own symbol. In the written form oiseau, English is full of these two, night through, cough. Irrational spellings, he called them, misleading about the spoken form.
Creating a disconnect between page and sound.
Exactly. And the consequence is significant. It leads to the mistaken idea that language itself depends on its written form, that the graphic symbols were the norm.
Like when people insist a letter must be pronounced because it's spelled that way.
Precisely. When in fact the symbol is just an imperfect representation of a sound that is often changed over time. For Saussure, linguists must look beyond writing to the actual system of sounds as revealed by direct observation. You have to listen to the living language, not just read it, to understand its phonology.
Focus on the auditory.
Yes. Which leads us to another key distinction within sound study. Phonetics versus phonology.
Okay, what's the difference there?
For Saussure, phonetics is essentially the historical science of sound. It analyzes the events and changes of sounds over time. It studies the modalities of sounds, how they're produced physically, their acoustic properties, how they evolve historically.
Like tracing Latin ia becoming different sounds in French?
Exactly. Tracking pedem to pied, ventum to vent, lectum to lit. Phonetics tracks the physical journey of sounds through history.
Okay, so then phonology is?
Phonology he saw as an auxiliary discipline belonging more to speaking parole, but with a systemic focus. It's considered outside time, because the basic way we produce sounds doesn't fundamentally change. Phonology focuses not on the physical properties, but on the mental opposition of auditory impressions.
The differences that matter for meaning.
Precisely. It studies the differential elements that make a distinct impression on the ear, identifying phonemes. Phonemes are abstract categories of sounds, like the T species, which covers all the slightly different ways we can say T, like in T versus stem, that don't change the word's meaning in English.
So phonology is about function within the system now.
Right. How sounds function to create distinctions in meaning at a given moment, like the difference between P and B differentiating pat and bad. Not their history, but their role in the synchronic system.
And this distinction helps avoid the delusions of writing.
Yes. By focusing on phonology, linguists can study the system of sounds as revealed by direct observation, identifying the irreducible moments, the homogeneous auditory beats that make up speech. Understanding sound not just physically, but as a systematic component of meaning. How sound acquires distinctive value.
Let's look more closely at language change itself, the dynamic nature. He talked about the absolute regularity of phonetic changes.
Yes. A key observation. Phonetic changes affect not words but sounds. And they are absolutely regular, meaning they identically alter all words containing a specific phoneme under the same conditions.
Like the German example. I'm changing to I, then I.
Right. Wind becomes vine. It happens consistently across the board for that sound in that environment. It's a blind, mechanical process affecting the sound itself wherever it occurs.
And these changes can be spontaneous or combinatory.
Correct. Spontaneous changes have an internal cause, like Proto-Indo-European or shifting to Germanic Om, without an obvious external trigger. Combinatory changes result from neighboring sounds, like Latin lactum becoming Italian lato, due to assimilation, the C influenced by the T.
And these changes are just random, unpredictable.
He described them as unlimited and incalculable. They affect all types of signs and demonstrate the blind nature of the evolutions of sounds. They happen mechanically without regard for grammar or meaning or intention. They just happen, and the language system adapts.
What about alternation, like German Gegengift?
Alternation describes these regular sound shifts that happen to coincide with grammatical oppositions. Saussure saw these as initially a fortuitous result of the underlying phonetic facts. A blind sound change might accidentally create a distinction, like the vowel change between geben and gibt.
And then the language uses it.
Yes. The mind seizes upon the alternations, attaches grammatical values to them, and spreads them, using the analogical models which chance phonetic developments provide. So the sound change wasn't for the grammar, but the grammar exploits the distinction created by the sound change. It becomes grammatically significant synchronically.
Which brings us to analogy itself. You said it's both creative and conservative.
Exactly. A fascinating duality. As a creative force, analogy is fundamental to linguistic creativity. It shows the power of parole. Speakers unconsciously compare existing patterns, drawing on both synecdoche and associative relations to form new words or structures.
Like forming die neuf based on other teens.
Precisely. Combining dix and neuf 9, mirroring diswit 18, or forming poirier, pear tree, from poire, pear, plus a suffix, by analogy with cerisier, cherry tree, from cerise. Nothing enters language without having been tested in speaking, he said. Innovation comes from active, often unconscious use.
But it's also conservative. How does that work?
Paradoxically, yes. Analogy constantly renews and supports existing forms, preventing them from decaying. Take Latin agunt, they do. It survived for centuries because it was constantly reinforced by analogy with other verbs like dicunt, they say legant, they read, sharing the same ending. And also by its own paradigm, agimus, we do, edges as you do.
So the patterns reinforce each other.
Exactly. The components, egg and unt, kept appearing in other combinations, constantly renewing and reinforcing the form agunt. Forms are then preserved because they are constantly renewed by analogy. It's a self-reinforcing mechanism within the system.
What about folk etymology, like sauerkraut becoming schokrut?
That's another interesting phenomenon. It happens when an unfamiliar word is mangled or reinterpreted based on known, similar-sounding forms. Crude attempts to explain refractory words, Saussure called it.
So French speakers heard sauerkraut and made sense of it using chou, cabbage, and kraut,
That's
crust.
Unlike analogy, which often involves forgetting the old form, folk etymology is an interpretation of the older form, though muddled. You try to make sense of the new by relating it, however inaccurately, to the familiar.
And finally, agglutination. Phrases becoming single words.
Yes. That's the process where a cluster of signs, maybe a common phrase, fuses into a single simple unit over time, often driven by efficiency, the mind's tendency to simplify. Like French toujours, literally all days, becoming the single adverb toujours always.
What were once distinct words just merge.
Through repeated habitual use, they agglutinate. It shows the language constantly restructuring itself, striving for economy and fluidity. Another example of the dynamic system at work. Hashtag tag outro.
So we've really journeyed deep into the foundations of language, guided by Saussure. We've seen how his ideas fundamentally challenge our everyday intuitive understanding of words and meaning.
They really force you to rethink things. Language isn't just a list of labels.
No, it's this intricate, dynamic system of differences, where every single element, every sound, every concept gets its value, its meaning, only from its relationship with all the other elements in the system.
Meaning is relational, differential, not inherent.
And his key distinctions, like langue and parole, they really illuminate that constant interplay, don't they, between the collective, abstract system, the shared code, the score, and the individual, concrete act of speaking the performance.
That tension is always there. And synchrony versus diachrony, those concepts give us indispensable tools. They help us understand both the stability and the constant evolution of language, how time and social forces are always reshaping how we communicate, often without us noticing.
And ultimately, his legacy goes way beyond just linguistics. It offers this powerful lens for analyzing any system of signs. Fashion, rituals, myths, advertising, you name it.
Absolutely. His core insight is that the very fabric of our reality, how we perceive the world, how we make sense of it, is deeply structured by these systems of meaning we inhabit, many of which operate way below our conscious awareness.
It's a humbling thought, really. How much of our perception is shaped by these invisible architectures?
It truly is.
So here's a final thought for you to take away. The next time you hear a word or speak one yourself, maybe pause for just a second, consider what invisible network of differences is giving that specific word its power, its meaning right here, right now.
And how's your own act of speaking, your individual parole, subtly yet constantly contributing to the ongoing evolution of this vast, intricate, and largely unconscious system we call langue?
It's a profound thought, isn't it? How much of our world, our understanding, is built on these unseen relational foundations.
Something to definitely keep pondering.
That's all for this deep